Welcome to the Behavioral View. Hey everyone, would you like to get a CEU for this episode? Listen closely for the announcement of 3 secret words delivered throughout the episode. Take note of those words, and we'll tell you where to go to get your CEU when the show is over. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Behavioral View. We are so excited to be back for episode 2 of the 3rd season. I'm Shannon Hill. I'm the editor-in-chief at CentralReach Institute, and I am here with my usual comrades. Nissa, you want to say hi?
Hi, everyone. Nissa Van Etten. I'm the Director of Assessment and Clinical Training here at CentralReach.
And Carrie?
Hey, I'm Carrie Millico. I am the Director of Clinical Programming at CentralReach.
And we are super excited to have Dr. Greg Hanley here today. Dr. Hanley, you have been one of our most requested guests, so we're very excited. I don't think you need much introduction, but I will say that you are CEO and owner of FTF Behavioral Consulting, and I believe the name of that town is pronounced Worcester. Did I do it okay?
That is proper. You nailed it.
All right. Awesome. Well, we have brought you here today to talk about, we'll talk basically about organizations that are trying to make that shift into a compassionate care model. But we like to launch in kind of slowly. So we're going to begin with our question of the day, which is a book or article that is from outside behavior analysis that you think behavior analysts should benefit from reading from. So everybody have their
I forgot about our question of the day.
I know. Who came prepared? Who did their homework?
You were kind enough to send me the question, so I did have some thought to it. So
right.
I appreciate that. I've been recommending for the last year a book that's been around for a few years. It's called The Rabbit Effect. And it's a great book on basically the science behind being kind. And I don't want to belabor the point, but there was a really neat accidental study where people were studying the effects of poor diet on cardiovascular disease in rabbits. And they found that there was a bunch of rabbits in the study that didn't develop the disease. And when they dug deeper, it was because that tech was taking the bunnies out and speaking to them and petting them while they were feeding them the crummy diet. And that kindness seemed to protect them from the ill effects of the diet. Then they did a randomized control trial of kindness and found that it indeed was that kind of caregiving responses. And that just set off, and that was published in the journal Science, which is a pretty darn good journal. And then that set off hundreds of studies on the effects of kindness as an independent variable. And it's quite powerful. And I think it will resonate with people trying to do compassionate ABA. It'll give them one more reason, if they need another, to do compassionate forms of ABA.
I'm going for that directly. I mean, I almost have tears in my eyes just at the thought of it, but thank you for that.
Sure.
I'll go if you guys need another minute, but when I wrote that question, it's been a while ago. It's probably been 2 years ago when I added that question to the list, and I pretty much thought I would be talking about, everyone should read Maslow, everyone should read the Belmont Report, things like that. But I can't believe what I'm going to say, actually, because I'm in a book club, which is supposed to be fun, light reading, and they decided to assign Brene Brown's The Atlas of the Heart, which I read. I kind of went in kicking and screaming because I thought, too pop psych stuff. But wow. The interesting thing in me on reading that book has been all of the literature that she is citing out on all of the things that we need to know. And I think as behavior analysts, we're so afraid of emotions. And just having her present, there is a lot of literature, there's a lot of research on actually how to define emotion, how possession of each of these emotional skills is important in life. What are the component skills, Carrie, for developing things like compassion and empathy? What kind of life experiences result in what kind of emotional sets? So it ended up that I'm bookmarking that thing all the way through so that I can go back and pull all of that original research. So
Cool.
I say read it.
Is that your first Brene Brown book?
I've seen like the TED Talks and that sort of thing, but
No, but book.
Yeah, but book, yeah.
I read. I feel the same about like that type of genre because a friend recommended to me "Girl, Wash Your Face" because that blew up, and I read I think maybe the first half of the chapter, and I was like, oh no, I can't do it. That's just too poppy for me. But I read Brené's Dare to Lead, and you're right, all the research that she documents and everything like that. And I was like, yeah, no, I can hang with this lady. And I've really appreciated her books because she brings that level of research to it. And as a behavior analyst, and I can, you appreciate someone who, brings that level of rigor and research to their writing.
And then I felt kind of bad about my attitude about it because I think we want dissemination, right? We don't hold on to everything.
You want someone who's accessible, who then can translate it to where the masses are like, yes, I'm buying what you're selling. Yeah. This is consumable for me. It's approachable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is, I think, something that our guest does very well.
Exactly. Yeah. Looking forward to watching in on that. Yeah. Well, what have you two come up with? Carrie, Nissa.
Okay, I'll go. I forgot you were kind in giving us the question of the day a little bit in advance, but I think there was some others that I was playing with and I forget what my other ones were, but this was one and I feel like this is an easy one. And it's not for everyone as your all's books are, but it is for a good number of people. And it was one that a previous guest recommended that then I went and read, but it's called Radical Candor by Kim Scott. And so if you're ever in a leadership position, where, and it doesn't have to be super high up as CEO or anything like that, where you're leading everyone, but if you're just, in a place where you give feedback as a BCBA and you're supervising RBTs or anything like that, Kim Scott served in, and she brings her experiences of multiple organizations, but she does have worked at Google and Apple. So us working at CentralReach, like there was some tech examples that we could definitely relate to, but talks about a radical candor as two sides of the same coin, where you have to care deeply for those that you supervise, right? Mm-hmm. And by caring deeply and building that relationship of trust, you actually can be clear in the feedback that you give, right? You don't kind of tiptoe around. And she has this matrix of where you can fall with how you may pull back with feedback, or you're too aggressive with feedback, or you give feedback without caring deeply, or you care too deeply and stuff like that. And the framework around it has been really great in shaping up me as a leader and how I give feedback and things like that. And it's really great. And even the tips and strategies, because I think even with my history as a clinician, I like to give gold nuggets of practical strategies that I can do right now. And she had a lot of those as well. So that is a book that I recommend widely that I think can, a lot of our listeners can use. So cool. not as life-changing as you all, but it's still like a good one. It's a B-lister.
No. Even if you're not leading an organization, you may be leading a family. You might be leading a PTA group. There's all kinds of different ways that we use those skills. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
All right, I will wrap it up. I think that they all kind of sum nicely into the text I'm recommending. I did not do my homework. I don't remember this question. But in my dissertation, I love the topic on compassionate care because it was all on compassion. And I read Compassionomics by Dr. Terziak and Mazzarelli. And it is amazing because they bring in literature and studies in healthcare regarding compassion as a practice on palliative care, nursing, oncology, and how those clinicians and medical service providers are trained in compassion to improve outcomes for their patients. So it was a really nice read. It aligns nicely. It's a nice way for us, as we're leaning into compassion, to think about how those service providers are trained in it very differently than our own experiences.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's
Very
wonderful.
cool.
I wonder if we should just kind of jump in there then and just with a very small thing and make sure that, well, I don't even know if we can make sure, sample. What does it mean to be compassionate?
Mm-hmm.
Anybody
That's
want
good.
to say,
Yeah.
I know the word. we had a little exchange
We
about
had a
it.
pre-discussion over this. So
Yeah.
that's, because in some communities, like, I like that we started using this word compassion in our field because I think we were going a little too aggro with, instructional control. Like, we as behavior analysts know what that means, but that word control may not lend itself easily on all listeners. And it may have crafted, some behaviors out of clinicians that are a little too forceful. This must get done, and so bringing the compassion, like you were saying, Shannon, allows us to remember that like feelings are okay and we show up as humans. But also, in some listening circles that I'm in, compassion sometimes gets bottled in with pity. Or like there's something wrong with you, so now I have compassion for you, like, oh, that's sad. And so I think it's helped us make a needed excellent turn. But I wonder if there's a situation or a time for refinements. Like, is this the word that we want to land on, or is this a needed word at a time where now do we want to? Is there like an opening for refinement? I don't know. How does this land for you all?
Well, before we respond, it is time for secret word number 1, which is it. IT. It.
Wow.
Complicated.
We're going simple on this word, huh?
Yep. Don't want to be a distraction. So, all right. Do we want to land on compassionate, or do we want to move that to something else?
I have some very strong views here, only again because of the last 3 years of my life being in the literature. And when I think about it, I think about Dr. Bridget Taylor and colleagues' paper from 2019, and then even Rohr and colleagues published the soft skills paper on bringing to light a compassionate collaboration tool. So they talked about family-centered treatment, making sure that we are putting the family and the client first, and really listening and understanding and applying our science in a way that improves the quality of life for those individuals. So I think, is compassion the word we are going to land on as a field as we move forward? I think about it in our history as a science and scientists in using compassion. It's very much a hot topic, right? It's something that is coming up often right now. But then I think to those other healthcare providers who are looking at compassion, and there's so much literature out there for healthcare services where they've had patient satisfaction surveys after your time spent in the hospital. What was your interaction like with your nurse? Were they compassionate? And these are the skills that you looked at. Did they come to your bedside in a kind, quiet manner? Did you feel safe and supported? So there are a lot of ways that we can define compassion that embed that. But I think as a field, we need to understand, because we are very much what is observable and measurable? What does that look like for us? If I'm going to watch a video of you, Carrie, working with somebody, and I'm going to, check plus or minus, did you engage in these 10 skills? And what is that checklist for compassionate behavior? I think that's at least how my mind operates if I'm going to transfer the skill to someone I'm supervising.
Well, and I think, and I want to give our guests an opportunity to respond, but just to like respond quickly, is I think that we can't necessarily compare it to all medicine, is because our clients are not necessarily, some may voice that they are, but like, we're not looking for a cure, right? This is not a curable thing. We're not looking for a cure. People seeking a cure. Some people may have voiced that, right? But this is not whereas in a hospital, people are seeking a cure.
They're trying to
right? And again, like, just even the way that you talked about it was like, oh, I'm going to come to you gently and quietly, where some of our clients need that. I've been the freaking cheerleader, bouncing off the walls, doing cartwheels, right? Like having competitions where that's not necessarily what you see in a hospital. So again, compassion in that instance, I think is very much the word you're looking for in that setting. Yeah. I think this is a different context, even though we are in the medical field. Okay.
Yeah, this is, it's nice to have these thoughts. We're still working through them, obviously, as a field. I certainly am as a professional. I mean, compassion to me, it just boils down to leads with concern for others in the moment and not just being future oriented. But to me, compassion is about leading with concern for the person you're helping, treating, assessing, educating, habilitating, and it's leading with concern every moment you're with them. So it's very present oriented. And it's also about being responsive, just being wildly responsive to the person that you're supporting in the moment. Again, I think historically, I, as a behavior analyst, was very future oriented. It was all about meeting the objective and the goal. And I would justify the means by the ends that we were trying to achieve. And compassionate ABA requires no justification of the ends. It simply should be beautiful in the moment because it leads with concern, is responsive every moment of the way. I don't want us, like you, Carrie, I don't want us to have to put that label in front of ABA. I don't want to call it, what we do is compassionate ABA per se. I believe it should be after ABA with a whole bunch of other descriptors. ABA is compassionate, and it is effective, and it is trauma assumed, and it is a bunch of things, not just compassion, because compassion on its own is not enough. I used to get a little irritated by the Hippocratic Oath, above all, do no harm. And I felt like some of my colleagues on my multidisciplinary team were doing everything. They were doing no harm, but they were doing nothing else either.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And there are courageous people in our field called behavior analysts who take on problems that no one else is taking on and really trying to solve them. And so ABA is also courageous along with being compassionate, because we are trying to achieve, these goals. I understand why some people in our field don't like it when we even say ABA is compassionate, because they go back to like Mont Wolf's social validity concept. And if we are doing that and embracing that with the passion that he wanted us to, and we readily assess the acceptability of goals, the acceptability of procedures all the time, continuously. And the third one, which we never seem to do in our peer-reviewed journals, is assess whether the amount of behavior change was meaningful to the constituents. If we just did those things and embraced them passionately, we wouldn't be talking about this anymore. We would have realized that dream described in the 70s, but for whatever reason, social validity became like a maybe if you feel like it. And now it's like we're just taking Mont Wolf's push and putting it now at the front end. And so I appreciate it. I'm all behind it. And I do appreciate the millennials who push this agenda. I mean, that's the one strength of the millennials. They're like, yeah, I'm not doing that because that's not nice. That doesn't feel right to me. So I'm not going to do that. I didn't have that strength. I didn't have that courage growing up. I just, succumbed to the authority figure of the field.
Yeah.
That is
it definitely does seem like a generational influence. But I also think that, like, looking at influences in this movement, I also think that there was a time, because I recently gave a talk about this, but I think that there was a time also in like 2020, like, changed everything in our world. Right. And I think also it brought about listening to voices that were not listened to, like with the Black Lives Matter movement and stuff like that. And I think that also us as a field, we started listening to more diverse voices racially, but also we started listening to like autistic voices. And like, part of compassionate care, like, do you think that there is also a move towards, an alternative to compassionate care that like includes compassionate care is neurodiversity affirming care? Where are your thoughts around that? And is that like included in today's ABA in the practice of like SBTE and things like that?
Yeah, I don't use those words myself, the neurodiversity inclusive kind of practices. I know what people are saying. I respect what people are saying. I do feel like I've been listening to autistic voices before 220. I would go to
Sure.
eclectic conferences and I would listen to the autistic werewolf and the guy that brought his kid to China and ride Mongolian horses. And, I've been listening, but I'm not an easy follower. I listen. I take it into account, but I just take it into account, and it takes me sometimes times to process. We were doing studies for a long time now on these things called concurrent chains arrangements, where we expose people to different contexts. Then we give them the opportunity to choose the context varying along singular dimensions, so we can learn things about the preferences of people. And some of those things were not consistent with the voices from the autistic community. And that's why it took me time to process it. So I guess what I'm saying is, yes, today's ABA, as we call it nowadays, does listen to autistic voices, but not just autistic voices. We also listen to the empiricism from these context preference assessments. We look at the effectiveness and efficacy of what we're doing. So I think it's not one thing. I mean, the trouble with the neurodiversity movement is fairly obvious. Those with voices are not representing those that do not yet have a voice. So that's a real limit on this, this neurodiversity stuff. But that said, everyone's voice matters, trying to listen to everyone's voice. But the practice of today's ABA is affected by a lot of things. Right.
Yeah.
And neurodiversity voices are one of them. Parents of kids who do not yet speak is another one. The data on what kids who do not speak prefer is a big one. And so all those things together, I think, are part of today's ABA. But and to extend it one more level, I believe you are spot on with your notion of 220. 220 was a big deal. And the Black Lives Matters movement had a great impact, I believe, on our field, because we were seeing things go on our TVs that were eerily similar to what was happening in practice. And I think that it resonated with us. And we decided we didn't want to be that field on TV with some really unfortunate outcome in the name of science, just like that was an outcome in the name of policing. And so we started to be a little bit more thoughtful, I think, about how we treat others and how aggressively we need to try to attain important outcomes. And I do think it all dovetailed really nicely. I know it affected the way I thought about the world at the time.
Well, with that, like, how do you think about the world? Like, given other men in your position and things like that, you, I think, went a different path. Like, what in your history guided? Because you were doing research in this stuff way before 220. Like, what impacted all of that for you?
Well, I think there's been a lot of role models in our field to do these sort of things. I think Alan Kasdan was a good role model for me, and he took the concept of social validity quite seriously, and he expanded his scope of competence from folks with intellectual disabilities to kids with oppositional defiant disorder and whatnot. And he had to develop, if you will, a more sensitive approach to those problems. And he modeled that through our field. Mont Wolf was a hero of mine, and so social validity was always at the forefront. I saw Pat Fryman a lot early in my career, and I thought I saw the way he spoke about our field and connected it with people. And he was very kind in the way he applied his, the independent variables. He was a good scientist, but he also connected with people well. So I had great exposure to all those people. And I think the other part is I had a very I don't know what the word is, like a fortunate path. I just had all these historical accidents that put me in contact with these amazing people. I got to work with Richard Fox because he was a consultant. I got to take class with Charlie Catania. Then I got to go to Kennedy Krieger, this amazing place and hospital just making changes in the moment in behavior that I've never seen before. So I had all these amazing experiences, and I just kind of stacked them together. And it really wasn't until I was out of graduate school and I'm at the University of Kansas, and I'm supposed to be an expert now, right? I have a PhD. I've been to all these amazing places, had these amazing advisors, and I'm expected to, kind of kick ass. And I wasn't. When it came to severe behavior, I wasn't solving the problem. I was just kicking the can around. And so I had to take a break from it. And we did more preschool work. We did more prevention work. We did more curriculum work. We did more of that concurrent change, identifying kids' values work. And it was really helpful to have some time away. So when I got back to it, when I moved back to Massachusetts and we, wanted to do some consulting, and we had a clinic, and we took some time. We took some time to kind of reinvent the process. And we started out just saying, we're not going to accept the dogma. We're really just, because I have time, I have the luxury of time as an academic, we're going to recreate the process. And we're going to try it on for size as consultants and as direct implementers in our own clinic. And we're not going to talk about it till we get it right. And so we spent a few years not doing research on functional assessment, treatment, severe behavior, because we were building something and understanding it almost for the first time. And I think, again, it's just a historical accident. It's a historical accident. I think the only thing I got going for me is I'm not an easily satisfied person. And I wasn't satisfied that I was doing a good job. And so that was really irritating.
Well, I want to say something here because while you were doing all of that with all of those fantastic names and everything, I was working in severe behavior in a state institution in a state that, we had a behavioral psychology program that was very mixed in terms of clinical psychologists and depending on what faculties they were there. But Ole Miss has tended to be behavioral from the beginning.
Yeah.
And so we would have access to some guidance that way. So I went through, I started with behavior mod, and then it was like, oh, no. There's this thing called functional assessment. We got to get all trained in that. So we send people off, we bring people in, and the thing about it is it's not that it wasn't effective or it wasn't working. It worked. But nobody wanted to do it because I didn't want to put on those pads and go in a room by myself with somebody who I was going to like trigger to kick my ass, Yeah. And the other part of it was that even when we got it to work, we had a hard time fading the one-on-one support out of that solution once we got the behavior tolerable enough. And we were also sending people back into their group homes just to continue that behavior.
Well, that's it right there, Shannon, right? That's it. You and I probably were turned on by the same things, right? In the moment, we were influencing behavior in ways that we never did before when we were doing BMOD. And that was powerful. That was powerful to be able to understand we can take this reinforcer, we can evoke the behavior, turn it off with the reinforcer, understand behavior before treating it. All that stuff just resonated with me. It was so powerful. It took a while to realize, though, that it worked under very certain set of conditions. And I tell you, one of the biggest things I learned, it was actually postgraduate school, was the distinction between efficacy and effectiveness. And that's really what moved me towards doing something different. So I finally realized those two words are not the same thing. And I did some reading on it because I taught research methods at University of Kansas, and I was teaching on these constructs. And, if you're not familiar with these distinctions, I know the panelists, but others, efficacy means it works under short-term conditions when implemented by experts in highly controlled environments. And effectiveness means it works when people are implementing it in terminal environments, homes and schools, and the people implementing it are parents and teachers, and it's implemented over long periods of time, and it yields a socially meaningful outcomes under cost-effective conditions. We never achieved effectiveness with the what's the function model, still haven't to this day, ever, and we never will, because we went down the microanalytic rabbit hole. We took the lens and put it too close to the phenomenon. And now that we're raising it up a little bit and just going back to a Skinnerian, Beowulf and Risley, if you can, an analysis is just turning it on and off. And if you can account for the variability by turning it on and off, you don't have to really worry about the function. And once we got to that, we learned, okay, let's worry about effectiveness. And we stopped worrying about, the details and taking the lens down so low. We finally were getting these effective outcomes. And so that's the whole thing, it's the transition from BMOD to functional assessment is what these young BCBAs are grooving on. And I love that they're excited about it, at least theoretically. Most aren't doing functional analyses, but they're reading about them, they're seeing them at conferences, and they're stoked about them, and they want to be microanalytic because, being scientific is powerful. But it's going to take them a few years of practice before they realize the shit don't work when you're in the real world. It doesn't. And you're never going to solve a behavior problem asking what's the function of the behavior. We proved that 40 years, we don't have a socially meaningful outcome from that model. So all models are wrong. Some are useful. Yeah. And this one is proven, it's proven that it's not useful enough. And so anyways, once we kind of learned those things and took the lens up a little bit and started worrying more about effectiveness, we started to find something that was starting to work more. And, we're still refining it, obviously, but those are the kind of experiences that I think people are finally having now. And if I can give one shout out, just so people could really understand this concept. I want you to read an article, listeners, by a woman named Dr. Masheed Gayamagami. And it's on functional communication from efficacy to effectiveness. And I think that's a very powerful article and will teach you to appreciate the history of our field, appreciate the historical process of what's the function and all that it gave us, but understand that in practice, it's different. It's not historical. It needs to be different.
I have to say the second secret word, which is cut, C-U-T, another simple and easy one.
Words are hilarious, Shannon.
Yeah. I want to. You mentioned something. It made me laugh a little bit. I didn't want people to think I was laughing at you. The survey that came out. Do you use functional analysis? And when it came out, I remember getting that in my inbox and looking at it and thinking, I'm not answering those questions because I don't trust that maybe they're going to come for my license if I answer them correct, truthfully and honestly. So one of the things that I really appreciate from you and your work is that you did give that voice to a lot of people who were out there who were like me, and not even just behavior analysts, the people who we were going in to work with, the special education teachers, the direct care staff, the parents were like, you want to do what? No. And so I want you, and maybe it's learning history, maybe it's personality, maybe it's feeling that safety because of the connections that you had. But, for people who are feeling that way, like I see something different that maybe the behavior analytic canon, whether it's this or something else, says one thing, but I see something different, but I'm scared to say it. You got any personal work for me on that?
Well, maybe that book Carrie mentioned can help with this, but I'm constantly talking to people in our consulting about empowering your direct service providers, empowering your EAs and your paraprofessionals. This is a thinking profession. They have to be responsive in the moment. The protocol has to be flexible. We have to give feedback that's non-punitive if they can defend their actions because they were doing it for safety or to make sure the process was beautiful or they thought it would enhance the relationship. And so when we teach values first kind of ABA and, the safety of you and the child and the relationship between you is more important than the objective. When we teach like that, I think we start to empower people. And we start to teach them to behave a little more flexibly, and we give people a voice. When we do things like that, we give people a voice. We allow them to defend their interactions in those flexible protocols. I think that's a good start, but this is hard. I like that you use the word canon. We do have I call them the canonical reinforcers, for instance, attention, escape, tangible, sensory, you know what I mean? And we know that the world of reinforcers is so much more qualitatively rich. And we have to allow people to think outside the box, if you will. So I know I'm not answering your question, but I will tell you this. How do we get there? We just have to allow people to understand what the behavior science and the language has given us, and understand that the phenomena we're studying is so much greater than that. And as a practitioner, you have to have a little courage to go beyond the language you've been given to understand and explain things. Sometimes research is going to have to catch up. So if your hunch is that they're doing it to see signs of damage in you, they're engaging in that behavior to control something, that's going to make you uncomfortable because you can't tack the study and whatnot. But there's a lot of phenomenon we have not captured in a young field yet that is real. And so we encourage people to think, we encourage people to talk. When we collaborate, we make sure the parents are involved, the DSPs are involved, and the EAs are involved, and they have as much voice as anyone with advanced degrees in that room. So I think that's how we shift it. You need a process that assumes competence and integrity in everybody and allows everyone to take part in that collaboration. Again, respecting full well, when you've got a master's degree and a PhD and you're the behavioral scientist, you're an expert on process. And you might see things that other people don't see. But sometimes that language system, I think we probably all agree, our language system gets in the way of our seeing. Sometimes language prohibits you from seeing things that are qualitatively rich and important. And that's why you need a team. You need a team with advanced degrees and a team of people just figuring it out, so you can get all those voices heard.
Are there any okay, so the licensure laws and who can practice what, and have you had to deal with any of that kind of pushback, or does being Greg Hanley that?
I'm going to say something that's going to get me arrested, or Jim Carr's going to come to my home and take my certificate. I don't know, but I just don't let that stuff get in my way. We consult as much internationally as we do in the U.S. I love the international stuff because nothing's been built. Again, I tell people you don't need any particular credential to do this process. I'm not doing this for behavior analysts. I'm doing this for kids who have externalized behavior disorders. And so when we go down to Nicaragua, when we go over to China, and we go to different countries, we have to make this doable independent of their degrees. And again, we're not doing this for behavior analysts, although we are behavior analysts. And I love to interact with behavior analysts because we speak the same language. But this is a process that needs to be in the hands of a lot more people than behavior analysts. There's a lot of us, but there'll never be enough of us. This needs to be in the hands of direct service providers, of special educators, physical therapists, occupational therapists, speech language pathologists, pediatricians, other psychologists. And so I'm not hamstrung by the licensing stuff. And again, I think we protect ourselves as far as our company goes because we don't do direct unless it's in Massachusetts.
Yeah, I was going to say, as someone who is a former chair of a licensing board, that onus is on the person who holds the license. You're in the clear. You're fine.
Okay, thank goodness. Yeah, so we just support other people. So if we're in New Jersey, the New Jersey people, they're doing the work and they have the license in New Jersey and we're supporting them. So we're kind of like behind the scene people, like ghost therapists. I used to be a ghost therapist for psychiatrists in Boston. The family would come in with the sleep problem. The psychiatrist would give me the interview results. I would type up a behavior plan, give it back to the psychiatrist, and they treat the family. And they never met me. And I like that. I like that ghost therapy thing. And I feel like our company is based on that a little bit. We're like behind the people, like supporting them. So I don't know. I don't get hamstrung by the licensing laws. I'm sure they're formidable. Maybe there's some obstacles there, but I'll be honest, Shannon, I don't know about them.
I learned.
Did I just say something that's going to get me in trouble?
No, you're good.
Okay. No. I'm still quivering from the day I got a letter from my licensing bureau when licensing became a thing. It got passed through, and I'd been doing the same work I'd always been doing. Then I got the letter: "You are practicing without a license." I'm like, oh, am I? but it just happened. Yeah,
and that's gotta tear your heart out. Yeah, that's rough.
Well, there's so many carve outs and everything too, and then I'm constantly in this conversation with myself about dissemination versus protecting scope of practice, and because I come from that. People are already grown up and they need a lot of support, and people are taking care of them, and people are trying to help them in various ways of life. And there's not a behavior analyst and an RBT for a 45-year-old man who occasionally, throws a chair through a wall. So
right, BCBAs aren't in adult services half the time, right?
more than half, probably. Yeah. And if they are, that's very small doses. And so I feel like we have a good science that can do a lot in helping all these people who actually are going to be living with that person is the way to go.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
And I hope BCBAs gravitate towards the stuff that we're teaching. I want it to be the purview of BCBAs, but at the same time, I don't think it should be exclusive to us. I think this is teaching, and this can be done by other people.
So if we have organizations out there who are, and we know they do, we hear about them, we hear from them, who are trying to align more with compassionate practices, do you have a 1, 2, 3 steps in terms of getting ready and moving forward?
Definitely not. It's right now it's an accident. I don't understand the controlling variables for one organization shifting towards and the other one not, but I can make some good guesses. Usually there's a leader involved, requires some leadership, and the leadership is reading the books like maybe we mentioned, and they're finally saying, as a leader, I'm going to try to influence us making a shift towards compassionate care. To compassionate care. So I do know that the organizations that have made the shift, as people are saying these days, made shift happen, that usually there's a leader. I know in every organization I can usually point to a leader. Oh, there's the special ed coordinator or the superintendent or the CEO or the chief clinical. So there's usually somebody, a pioneer, a hero in the organization that kind of puts their foot down and says, hey, gang, let's pivot. And they're a person that, is a good leader because people are listening. I think the other thing, to be honest, is, but it can happen from the bottom up. And we've seen that too. It happens from the bottom up when sometimes just an RBT or a BCBA reaches out, and they do this with our company. They reach out to our company and they say, this stuff is really resonating with me. How do we do this? And we talk to them. We say, try to get someone from your organization to give you permission to do this in a supported way with one client. It starts with one client. We need an RBT or a paraprofessional, an EA, and maybe a BCBA, a little dyad that just says, I want to try this on for size. And they do it properly. They get knowledge. They take the courses or the workshops. They get supported implementation, synchronous implementation, so they learn how to do analyses safely. And then they do follow-up treatment consultation for 12 or so weeks. And then they create a video story. Here's where we were in baseline. Here's the parents' thoughts on where we were. Here's where we are now. They show videos of the shaping process. When they show success at their hands, on their turf, with a client that they're providing services to that's on everybody's radar, that's when people pay attention. So it's like two parts. It's nice if you have a leader that's supporting it because someone needs to pay the bills, because to pivot, you need support to do that. Second, you need a couple heroes on the ground that is saying, I want to try this. I'm not comfortable with the way I'm doing ABA right now. I'm not comfortable with all the tears. I'm not comfortable with the restraint and seclusion, all the accidental things we as professionals have taken on. And they have to be successful. You can't convince people through words. You know what I mean? No offense to I'm glad we're having words, but no one's going to be doing old ABA and then they're going to shift to compassionate ABA based on conversation. They got to see it. And the closer it is to their home, the more likely they're going to pay attention. So again, my mission is to build capacity in at least 2 people in an organization. I don't need everyone on board. In fact, when I have meetings, I often say, it looks like you're skeptical of this, and that's reasonable. It took me 10 years to shift my practice. I'm asking you to shift it in a 10-hour course. So how about this? How about you step aside? And I say it just like this, just step aside, just watch. Let these pioneers take it on, see if they can prove that it works. And so I think that's part of the process too. It sounds a little brash, but it's not a debate. The time for debate is behind us. It's time for people to do something and solve the behavior problem. And if they solve a behavior problem that no one could before in that organization, that's when shift happens. So if I look back at the organizations that have made the shift, it's a leader and it's a couple pioneers that deliberately learned to do this properly through a behavior skills model, and they produced an outcome that was unprecedented in their organization, and then people get on board.
Is there some guidance on choosing the first client to be the pilot with?
That's a super good question. We were too prideful, to be honest, when we first started this consulting company. We'd say, pick your toughest kid. Give us the kid that, been in and out of Kennedy Krieger 4 times. That's who you should start the process with. That was a mistake because those kids are very challenging, and the process is a big problem-solving process, and sometimes there's some restarts. It's an iterative process for very complex cases, and that's not who you want to start with. You want to start with the child for whom it's going to be reinforcing, for whom the shaping process is going to be fairly errorless, and you're going to get to that finish line fairly quickly. So we do this little thing. We say, to identify a client who's living here, but their potential is here. And when you take the course or whatever, you're seeing that client. You can see how they could be advanced. We have other things. We say, what about, the family needs a big win. They're the most wonderful family. They would do anything you asked them to do. And so there's not like, the family's living in a car and they have mental health issues and da-da-da. Don't pick that as your first family. Pick a cohesive, supportive unit. The teacher's on board, the family's on board, the child is just not living up to their potential because severe behavior is getting in the way. They're not the toughest kid in Pennsylvania, but they're on the radar. They're about to lose their school placement. They're about to be placed out of district. You know what I mean? So everyone's aware of the problem, right? They have to be aware of the problem. If you solve a problem that no one knows about, shift won't happen. So you got to solve a problem that everyone knows about, but it has to be within your range of solvability. It can't be the most complex case you've ever seen. A lot of times people, when they hire consultants like us, they want to expand their scope of competence. They're like, we're hiring you so we can take on a problem that we were afraid of in the past. And I said, that's not how you do it. Take on a problem you're not afraid of. You know that profile in and out, but you just haven't solved the behavior riddle yet. You know what I mean? Know your client. So some people will say, we want to start serving adults, so we're going to hire you. Well, if you never work with adults, don't do a new clinical process yet. Do it with the profile of the learner that you have good, that's well within your scope of competence. Let's be super effective within your scope of competence, and then you start expanding your scope of competence. So those are some thoughts.
Do you ever get an organization that already drank the Kool-Aid and they're just like, no, we want organizational change now? Like, don't give me a pilot. We want it all.
Yeah, no, they do that. We try to walk them off that, Carrie, to be honest. So our typical relationship, we believe in multiple exemplar training like everybody else. And so it's usually 3 clients supported by 2 or 3 professionals like a DSP and a BCBA and someone else. And we try to train those 6 to 9 professionals to be effective in the process through authentic application with those 3 clients. We try to start out with 3, and we do a consult hour with 3 clients in 1 hour. And so that's our typical model. But some people, like you said, come along and said, we just want this. We want to make it happen. Like it's the superintendent and they just want it, a mandate from the top down. Again, we try to walk them off the mandate, but sometimes we enter into relationships where we start with 24 kids supported, 80 staff supported from the beginning, but we're still very strong on it can't be a mandate. If someone doesn't want to do it, let them step aside. You know, that's a really important part of this. Exactly. And the thing is, if you want this to fail, this clinical process to fail, it'll fail. Failure is easy. People spend their whole lives not solving behavior problems and getting raises. So our culture is totally accepting of failure in the severe behavior world, right? You can get raises and acknowledgement. As long as you manage the behavior and show up with your graphs, you'll be fine.
It's time. You're getting paid for time. Not on outcome.
You're getting paid for time and also for making people feel better that you'll stand there with them while the both of you do.
That's right. You'll share the burden.
Feel good. Yes, I acknowledge that this is hard.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Sharing the burden and management is enough. And sometimes we have to go into that mode, but that can't be our default or primary mode. So again, as long as it's not a mandate, as long as people are excited about it, and we do these things called kickoff events. It's like just get everybody in the damn Zoom room. The janitor, the cook, the bus driver, all the direct service people, the PT, the OT, the SLP that thinks an omnibus man is ridiculous. Get everyone in the room, and let's just have a 90-minute talk about what this is and 30-minute Q&A. And then from that, what we do is we have a screening process, and it goes like this. Who wants to do this? That's it. We kick it off with, here's the knowledge, here's what it is. You can ask any question you want, and then it's just a screen. Who wants to do this? And if you don't want to do this, no worries. I know people that have looked me straight in the eye and says, this is not for me. this hippy dippy ABA that you're selling is not for me. You're dangerous. I've heard all those things. And I say, I understand. No worries. Step aside. Step aside,
we do a
because
lot
she's
of,
excited about it.
we do trainings in Ascent or webinars and stuff, which, like, I feel like you've never said Ascent, but that shows up in the work that you all do. And
we say it now, Carrie. We're late to the game.
Okay. Oh, okay. Good. All right. Good to know that. And so some of the questions that come in, so many people are like, God, this now my values are in alignment with my practice. This feels good.
Yeah.
And then, but there are still some that are like, yeah, you see it in some of the responses, and that's good. Like, you're like, and then that you can continue your path, and
your journey
will go this way. And
listen, ABA, people in ABA have been effective long before we started chirping, right? ABA is an effective field, and there have been people solving problems well before we've talked about compassion ABA, trauma-assumed ABA, today's ABA, what have you. The real challenge, the consideration for me, Carrie, is that old ABA may work for certain clients, but it carries too strong a risk for some clients, and we don't know the proportions. But for every client you're treating, I don't know, but there's a proportion of clients that you're sending down the rabbit hole, right, through report extinction programs and all that, and they're ending up still being institutionalized, out of district placement, and just the machine goes on. And so the preference for this style of ABA is to be more inclusive, to start out with a process that may actually be effective for more learners. Obviously, people need to do research on this. Maybe I'm supposed to be that person, but I have a really hard time doing research these days because the control condition is the old ABA, and I'm not doing it with kids. I'm not watching kids cry anymore. I'm not traumatizing them in the name of therapy. So it's hard to prove some of the things we believe in. And so we're all going through a little dissonance as disseminators and researchers, and knowing how to allocate our time, to those different areas. But again, I love ABA, and it's been solving problems for a long, long time, but we've been pretty Machiavellian. The process could be whatever it needed to be to get that outcome. And today we're not that. We know that the process needs to be as beautiful as the outcome. And we know how to do that nowadays. So that's what we're going to do.
Yeah. For sure. And it's just like, and I heard you even having to defend your position of saying, I love ABA, because it's just sad that we even have to say like, oh, but we're doing this cool new stuff and what I think is good for our clients, but we still have to say, I love ABA, even though we're like, oh no, but I'm doing ABA, but it's just really cool stuff. But I still have to say, I love ABA. Isn't that like assumed?
I understand, though, there's a lot of people, Carrie, that loved ABA but got kicked out of ABA because it wasn't the ABA that was practiced at the time, right?
It wasn't the canon, right?
It wasn't exactly. It wasn't part of the canon. So there's a lot of people. Our field is kicked to the curb because we have kind of cartels running journals and conferences and whatnot. And, one of the best people in our field was Alan Kasdan, but he got enough heat that he decided to do his own thing. And now he's maybe the most influential clinical psychologist in America. David Barlow, one of the most influential psychologists in America. He's not showing up at ABA conferences. He's not showing up in ABA journals. Mark Duran, Ted Carr. The list goes on of people that try to bring a values first form of ABA, and they get kicked to the curb. Stephen Hayes, even he kind of just had to walk off and do his own things. So in some ways that extinction, if you will, of the new behavior has led to some great things, right? It's led to great conferences and books and journals, and that variability maybe is to be appreciated. But I chose not to really go down that route. Not that I'm putting myself in the same league as those heroes of mine, but I chose to say, this is just ABA. Don't put a word even before it. Today's ABA is a very recent thing. I just say, when people say you should call it holistic ABA, humane ABA, I'm like, it's just ABA. ABA's been humane and holistic from the drop. It's just that we got off track getting micro analytic. We got off track being overly technological, and we lost the heart of ABA, and now it's just coming back, partly because of millennials, partly because of Black Lives Matter, partly because of autistic voices, but everything's kind of converged to bring back the heart to ABA, which is really nice. So I think we got to be really careful distinguishing it and just saying, this is ABA, but here's how ABA is different from maybe historical ABA. That might be the only delineation that I'm comfortable with.
I don't know if you've been involved in or maybe listened to some talks around precision teaching, but Elizabeth Houghton is one of our OGs, and she's a teacher, not a behavior analyst, but she used to give talks, way back when in AUG days about the big heart. And she said it's science plus caring. Yeah. And I think that has, I'm like, yes, this existed back then. We just, again, like you said, lost our way and got like procedural as opposed to just.
We did. And we fell in love with control, and we fell in love with science. We fell in love with classification. We're trying to emulate the medical model maybe too much. I mean, I remember as a young guy hearing, I won't say names, but two very well-known behavior analysts, and we were at a big lunch, and they were talking about how when students wrote in their personal statement that they really were into the science of learning and all that kind of stuff, they were like, you're in. But if they wrote anything about helping people, they were out. So there was like a generation of leaders in our field that really wanted to push the translational science, basic research agenda. And I think it really got in the way of our potential. And we did. We lost that caring part of it. And in fact, those people were literally marginalized from some of our best programs because of this attitude of, if you're in this to help people, you're not for me, because I'm a scientist and we are here to advance things in a, academic, scholarly way. And again, I was fortunate enough to kind of travel in some of those circles, but I got into this to help people, and I just kept it to myself until I didn't have to.
That's the trick. Or that was the trick.
That was.
Luckily, hopefully we're in a new world now.
Completely.
Well, we're moving forward. But I would not be me if we ended this without me saying thank you also for the comment about categorizations and such, because I do have nothing I have this other war inside of myself about autism has spread ABA. And yet I don't think ABA was created for autism. No. And I don't even like that we require a diagnosis to get access to ABA services. So I do know that you are serving a wider umbrella. So I appreciate having that model and being able to point to. So hopefully as we move forward, we can break away from the silliness of diagnosis.
Yeah, I agree. I doing PhD classes, I like to do ideal questions. And in an ideal world, how would kids get ABA services? That was a common question in one of my courses. In an ideal world, how would they come? People are still latching on to the label and classification system, but eventually they got to a point of maybe coming up with like a response to intervention model where everyone gets a universal curriculum, and depending on how they respond to it, they get more support, and depending on how they respond to that, they get more support. Kind of a socialist model, if you will, but we call it a tiered system or an RTI model in schools, and it seems to work pretty well. So I agree with you, Shannon. I hope we move towards that time and place. There's something about the labels, right? There's something about knowing kids with certain genetic conditions, and it predisposes you to be more effective with that child and family. But at the same time, we ran a clinic in Western Mass for 12 years, and it was for kids who didn't have the right label to get services. That's what the clinic existed for. It was the kids who didn't have the label, but they still had the problem behavior. They still had the stick-down feeding problem. So I think ABA is not, of course, it's not just, if you will, for people with autism. But I used to say, well, people used to always disparage that too, Shannon, like, oh, another thing on, problem behavior and autism. And again, I walked away from that area for a while, working with typically developed preschoolers, and then 6 years or so, then walked back to it. And then I started thinking, I'm like, you know what, gang, we haven't come close to solving that problem yet. You're basically saying that's our one problem we've been given, right? We're given the one problem of the unique challenges associated with folks on the spectrum. We haven't solved that riddle yet, right? 42% of, in the Loba studies, that's not good enough. And solving severe problem behaviors is not happening with regularity yet. So I want, like you, I want us to be, expand our scope of competence to all kids with problem behavior and, people doing ACT and people are doing that. There's people in safety and sports and working with problems of the language able and all that. But at the same time, we still have a lot of work to do to solve the problems that we've actually been given to us, that people see us as being responsible for. We're not there yet. Behavior management, do you agree? Behavior management is still the way. Most organizations are merely managing behavior and showing the same topographies of problem behavior at IEP meetings year after year. That stuff's still going down. So I want to expand my competence. I'd love to, I want to go work with some elders and, work in dementia and all that. I think that would be lovely, but we haven't solved the problem yet. And so I'm going to stick with it until there's some scale to what we're talking about here.
Before we close, wait, hold on, Shannon. I do want to ask, given, the what ifs, where do you see ABA in 20 years? Is it I know you very proud of the work that you're doing is incredible and has changed, advanced the field. Is that the ending point, or do you have a greater reach? Do you have a greater scope of where you would like to see the field going?
I'm a little myopic, Carrie. I don't think I can see beyond 5. I'm a 5-year guy. 20, okay, so I don't know if I'm be around. I'm kind of a lead a risky lifestyle in some ways, I don't think 20 years I'm going to be around to see it. So as far as, just to really think outside the box, I think ABA will be codified as an educational and medical approach to certain problems. The problems that are in front of us right now are probably going to be the problems that are going to be in front of us mainly in 20 years. I think we'll be expanding our scope of competence quite slowly. It's going to take a long time. I do believe we'll still be around. I do believe the type of ABA that is sustainable is only a compassionate, trauma-assumed form of ABA. The old ABA is going. These programs are not going to be around. I'm not trying to be threatening, but you asked me to predict the future, and that stuff just isn't defensible. It's fine behind hallways. It's fine in the back of institutions, but everything's exposed these days, and that's a great thing. The exposure is great. And so I think it's going to be a kind of ABA that's very stakeholder driven. I think, again, it'll be compassionate. We'll be worried about the beauty of the process as much as the satisfaction of the outcome. I think we'd be better. I think we're going to actually solve problems, not manage them. I think we won't be known as the people who seclude, restrain, and punish. I think we're going to be known as the people who bring joy. I think we're going to be known as the people who make kids smile, who make kids effective, who help people achieve their goals. I think that's going to be who we are. And I think that's really something to look forward to. And I do believe we're going to expand our scope of practice in ways that I don't think we can predict. I think it's going to be a historical accident. There's going to be another Catherine Maurice who's going to write the book. And all of a sudden, this is going to be something in preschool for all preschoolers. Or someone's going to write the book on some gerontologist ABA types, and it's going to be saying, listen, you can't have a nursing home without this technology. So I just think at some point, there'll be some historical accident that's going to expand our scope of competence like wildfire. But I have no idea. And I don't think we'll ever leave the problems we have now. I think we're just going to get better at solving them, and the process will be a little more handsome. And even 20 years, I think we'll be doing these things. Yeah.
Love it. Sounds optimistic too. All right. So we're going to talk about how people can get access to the courses, but we do need to do the last secret word. And I like to have a little bit of fun with these. And this time, I'm going to ask Greg to say the word. If you will click over in the right-hand part of your screen to the chat box from the studio box.
Studio chat. Go ahead.
Yep.
Check.
So I was cooking dinner the other night and I thought, there's a family war about this word. And if anybody knows how to pronounce it, it might be you. There it is. Could you say that for
Worcestershire. The next word, and you might misspell it, is Worcestershire. Would you like me to spell it, Shannon?
That is okay.
Harder than it.
It is a little harder than
Are people seeing it? They would see it in the chat. Is that correct?
we're going to pop it up on the screen. So you do not have to spell it, and
Okay.
they only have to select it from a list, and we'll put things like ketchup in there.
Okay,
So.
good. I hope there's some listeners from the UK that are probably saying that Hanley doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. It doesn't sound like Worcestershire, because that's clearly a word from UK. And
Yeah.
I'm just saying that's how Americans in Massachusetts would say that.
Great, because Americans in Mississippi and Arkansas just say, I don't know, just give me some
Yeah, I use that sauce. I make a homemade Caesar salad dressing, and I just made it
a little bit of
for
that.
my husband this week. Yeah, we need a little bit of that in it. And my son was trying to pronounce it, and he just started laughing halfway through, and he kept on trying, restarting, and laughing the whole time.
I can't imagine learning English. I mean, just heteronyms.
I hear it's quite difficult.
Words like that.
Absolutely. All right. So for anyone who is looking to begin their training journey, Greg, you've got a few courses out there.
Sure. Well, we just linked up with CentralReach. And so my understanding is those who subscribe to CentralReach get a discounted access to the courses from our group called FTF Behavioral. And there's a course for BCBAs. It's a 10-hour course on how to do a practical functional assessment and skill-based treatment. There's a course for behavior implementers, in other words, DSPs, behavior specialists, paraprofessionals, ed techs. And that's actually a longer course, a 12-hour course, because it involves more data collection and the nitty-gritty. That's also available, again, through CentralReach and through FTF Behavioral Consulting. But if you're a subscriber to CentralReach, it would behoove you to go through there because there's an agreed-upon discount, which is cool. There's a bunch of other courses too, article reviews, but I'll let you figure that out. But again, if you want to get going on this, I think it would be really lovely for you to consider taking the PFA and SBT course and getting access to the evidence behind the practice as well as the exemplars. And then I hope you can find somebody to give you some support to implement it well.
That's right. And it will also behoove you, if you are a CentralReach user, to tune into our brand new CentralReach Institute social media pages, because this is where you're going to get notified of things like this. We do it now through a newsletter process that comes every couple of weeks or so, but we will tell you everything as it's happening. If you will follow us on LinkedIn at CR Institute or on Facebook at CR Institute, you will find this stuff in your inbox as it emerges. Yes. And Greg, there's also a practical functional assessment.com web page, right, where you have a lot of free resources out there.
True. Yeah, there's 3 probably relevant social media things in my world. One is practicalfunctionalassessment.com. That's all free stuff, all the articles, videos, hand interview forms, translated in a bunch of languages. So that's useful. There's that Facebook group. I have to give a shout out to that Facebook group. It was created by some people in the UK. It's moderated mainly by US folks nowadays, but it's about 19,000 members. It's called PFA and SBT Community. You can ask a question day and night, and you'll get an answer. It's an amazingly positive and supportive group. And again, our company website for trainings and consultation is ftfbc.com, FTF Behavioral.
You got any live viewings coming up?
We got a whole bunch. Go if you can't go to this. I like that you allow me to do plugs. I feel slightly uncomfortable doing it, but I'm doing it anyway. I'm not much of a salesman. But we have a thing on the website on FTFBC. It's called FTF Live, and you'll see where all these 2-day trainings are. But this year we have trainings. We had trainings in Israel, Detroit, Chicago coming up. We're in New York, Santa Maria, California, Miami, Melbourne, Australia. We're going over also to Dubai in October. And there's a couple others that I'm not remembering. I apologize to those sites. But yeah, we're hustling this year. It's post-COVID. The on-demand courses are great. I strongly recommend people take the on-demand, but there's still people that just want the live. They want to interact. They want to answer questions. And we do design sessions. So people leave those 2-day workshops with a plan, an assessment treatment plan for a client to go implement. And so, yeah, I hope you see one of these on-site trainings. They're pretty, they're pretty fun.
Sounds fun. Yeah. Carrie, how about you? You going anywhere, doing anything? Where can you be seen?
This airs in February, right?
Yes, this airs in February. So what you doing?
Yeah. So I'll be in Calaba. I got a busy Calaba. We're doing a 3-hour workshop of ethical instructional design. And then I am on a licensure panel. Ooh, so exciting for that one. But talking about the good and bad and evil.
Attend.
I know. And then, yes, sharing all of that experiences. And then I'm a discussant on a Ascent and Social Validity Symposium that's put on by clinicians from First Step and Easter Seals. So
it's a lot. You're busy.
Yeah.
How about you, Nissa? What's going on?
Everything's in the end of the spring. So I'm headed to New York in May for the, it's an adult service conference on best practices in assessment. And then in June, I'm heading to Virginia for another conference for special education.
Excellent. Well, I've got APBA coming up where we're going to be talking we're going to be talking about some supervision resources and growing your own BCBAs, using your own data to find ways to intervene and to help build that skill set and keep, hopefully, retention around. And I think that's all I want to say about that. We do have the behavioral view coming up. 3.3 next month will be with Kathleen Stingle. So we're going to be talking about multidisciplinary approaches. So you guys be sure to hang around and come back for that. So Greg, thank you so much. This has been such a delight.
Thanks for the chance. Yeah, you guys are really fun, and I appreciate what you're doing, and I appreciate you giving me the chance to talk to your subscribers.
Yeah, and subscribers, by the way, this is a time limited thing for this discount. So if you want this and you want maybe future opportunities, you need to show Greg that you really want it.
Show love.
Show love. That's right. But meanwhile, thanks everyone for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next month.
Cool.
Thanks for watching this episode of The Behavioral View. To get your CEU, follow the link in the instructions below. You can then go to the attendance verification quiz where you'll enter in the secret words and pay the CEU fee to generate your certificate. If you've already done the work, you may as well get the credit.